vertigo there. Okay. Good morning, everybody. I think you see me. Good morning.
Good morning.
Allison. Some people will probably walk in, but it's okay. People spoiled because it's on the video. But so I changed it. I don't know if you guys are keeping track of what I'm doing on online there, but we were going to do creation and the Sabbath, but I changed it to the Civil Magistrate. We're completely out of sequence, but this is one of the ones that I thought was really interesting that Soren wanted me to cover this. When there's so many other important things like justification and sanctification and all that, but this, I think with what's going on in the world today, especially in America, this section on the Civil Magistrate is pretty interesting and how it applies to our country right now and what the original Westminster Confession of Faith said and all of that, you know, and the differences between the ARP and the OPC and the PCA, which is pretty dramatic. So, what do you think of when you see the word Civil Magistrate? Sorry, just you two are going to be answering questions.
Something outdated. Something from a different century than this one.
Oh, it is a different century, different millennia.
Yeah.
No, not different millennia. 1647. Yeah, different millennia, right? We were in 2000, so we are in a different millennia of 1900. But anyway, yeah. So it's from 1647 when they, or 1643 when they first started writing the Westminster Confession of Faith in England. And who was the civil magistrate? Or what was the civil magistrate?
Civil, having to do with people.
Who ran the country?
Magistrate. So the king.
The king?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the king, and if you remember back from your early England history, you know, where I used to always think it was so weird that I would call my forefathers from Italy. They weren't from England or even from this country. But yeah, but where our nation came over from England and they left the country where there was a civil magistrate, which was, you know, the king and anybody had around him. Sounds familiar, right? Anyway, so the king would just put those people who were completely loyal to him around him. But he was the authority that everybody pointed to. There's the... So I said we're skipping and we're jumping right to the civil magistrate. Oh.
Okay, good, because that's what I read last night.
Did you? Okay, because
Yes.
I think I mentioned it, that I was going to switch it.
I was like, this is interesting. Yeah, because I was like, I didn't write down what you said, but I feel like I remember you saying that, so.
See, now I thought you were going to sit there. No, I'm just kidding. All right, so I was saying...
A bit against my will.
What do you think of when you see civil magistrate, and we concluded, you know, back in 1647, that would be the king. So, you know, there was the divine right of kings. The king, you know, wielded complete power, and the king was the head of the church, not Jesus Christ. The king actually was the head of the church. So since you have the book we're using,
Yep.
and you already read it, actually, before we even go to that, I want to go back to the last chapter because it mentions the civil magistrate, and we didn't have time to do it last week. So look in chapter 20. Just read section 4. I think you may have read it,
Okay.
but we didn't get time to talk about it here. I'm just gonna.
20 section. Okay.
Something on the back of that too. Ah, that's what it is. Okay, I was wondering. I think I got all the notes on the front and the back. Beautiful. Yeah. I don't even know if you're reading any of those in that book. So read.
Okay, so read from the book?
Read from the book.
Okay.
For that.
And because the powers which God hath ordained, and the liberty which Christ hath purchased, are not intended by God to destroy, but mutually to uphold and preserve one another, they who upon pretense of Christian liberty shall oppose any lawful power, or the lawful exercise of it, whether it be civil or ecclesiastical, resist the ordinance of God, and for their publishing of such opinions or maintaining of such practices as are contrary to the light of nature or to the known principles of Christianity, whether concerning faith worship or conversation, or to the power of godliness, or such erroneous opinions or practices as either in their own nature or in the manner of publishing or maintaining them are destructive to the eternal peace and order which Christ hath established in the church, they may lawfully be called to account and proceeded against by the censures of the church.
Okay, now was anybody following along in one of those different sections? Because the one that matches what Katie just read is PCA. So you see there's the original Westminster Confession of Faith. Was anybody following along on that one? No.
I started in the
Then you saw,
ARP.
and then you saw it went
I was
off.
following, original and by the power of the civil
So
magistrate.
did you catch that difference that Katie stopped and there was no civil magistrate there? So let's read the original 1647 version. And because the power which God hath ordained and the liberty which Christ hath purchased are not intended by God to destroy, but mutually to uphold and preserve one another, they who, upon pretense of Christian liberty, shall oppose any lawful power or the lawful exercise of it, whether it be civil or ecclesiastical, resist the ordinance of God, and for publishing of such opinions or maintaining of such practices as are contrary to the law of nature or to the known principles of Christianity, whether concerning the faith, worship, or conversation, or to the power of godliness, or such erroneous practices either in their own nature or in the matter of publishing or maintaining them. Now, all of that is the same, and then it kind of sways off, are destructive to the external peace, order which Christ hath established of the church, they may be lawfully called to account. So this is the justification for anyone who opposed what was being taught in the Church of England. They could be executed. So basically, the power that they're talking about here is the king, and he has the power to execute someone who's publishing, incorrect doctrine. Okay, and you see it does say, and proceeded against by the censors of the church. Does anybody have any idea what that means? Big deal. It's a big deal in the ARP and most people.
Proceeded against.
What's the
like
censures?
brought to kind of trial.
Yeah, what's the censures?
And censures people that censor things.
Yeah, it comes from the same word. It basically, we have actually a whole book in our doctrine that's called the Book of Discipline, and it explains biblically what you do when somebody breaks a rule in the church. They can be brought before the procedure normally is somebody will see an offense and they'll go to the person. That's one-on-one. That's right out of Matthew. Go to the person and say, hey, you've been passing around these flyers to people in the church without checking with the elders. I don't think they agree with the doctrine, so that would be the publishing, for example. They still continue doing it. Then you go with a friend, another buddy, and say, hey, so you have a witness, and then you would go to the elders and you would bring it before the elders once you've done that, and they would then put a censure on that, and you could even go to trial and could be excommunicated. But what's interesting how this carries forward into the ARP, when you excommunicate somebody from the church in ARP doctrine, PCA, OPC, and most Reformed denominations, you're actually taking away their salvation. I know it sounds weird, but according to how the Westminster Confession of Faith interprets the Bible, the elders have the keys to the kingdom. Peter was the first person giving the keys to you. I give the keys to the kingdom. And by bringing somebody up, so it's a very, very dramatic situation if it ever got to the point where that would have to happen. It does happen. When I go to synod meetings, when we're in closed session, you hear about this person or that person who's being censored and they're considering taking away the keys to the kingdom. But that should be considered the more serious thing. But then it goes on to say, and by the power of the civil magistrate. So you see that at the end, and by the power of the civil magistrate. Notice it's not in the OPC, and it's not in the PCA. The only conservative Reformed denomination that has kept it in is the ARP. The way when this changed, actually we became a country theoretically in 1776. By 1779, the ARP that was in America already changed this to that. So this goes way back to when it was changed. Now, of course, the PCA didn't come around to 1969, I think it was, and the OPC came around in 39 or something like that, 1939. So they made their revision much further away from England and the power of the king. But as we read this next section, you're going to see they didn't just leave this different as far as the civil magistrate. So what does this all lead to? What do we say we have in this country? What authority does the church have and what authority does the state have in each other's realms? We call it a separation of church and state. So do we have a separation of church and state? Is a separation of church and state biblical? Now, for many, many years, hundreds of years, people lived on the premise that there was no separation of church and state, that if there's going to be a church in the state, it's run by the government. And again, it's mostly pulled from the Old Testament. Okay, so now we have this whole separate section called of the Civil Magistrate. So go ahead and read, again, you got the book, so if you don't mind. It's 23 of Civil Magistrate, and
Section 3?
I think it's on the back here.
yeah, you have, well, do you have it on
3?
there? Let me see.
23.3?
Yeah, use that one, okay, because that actually even had more. Okay, so, but you guys follow along in the Westminster Confession of Faith, in the 1647 version, catch the differences, and you read
So section 3.
section 3, yeah.
Okay. The civil magistrate may not assume to himself the administration of the word and sacraments, or the power of the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Yet he hath authority, and it is his duty to take order that unity and peace be preserved in the church, that the truth of God be kept pure and entire, that all blasphemies and heresies be suppressed, all corruptions and abuses in worship and discipline prevented or reformed, and all the ordinances of God duly settled, administered, and observed. For the better effecting whereof he has power to call synods, to be present at them, and to provide that whatsoever is transacted in them be according to the mind of God. That's it.
Let me see that.
I didn't catch difference.
I should have gotten this book for myself. I don't know.
You ever read it before? I didn't write it.
I know it by heart, but I don't know this. You never know what version you're getting. May not assume to himself the administration of sacrament.
Yeah, this isn't the first time this has happened to us in the past.
So what version is that supposed to be?
I thought it was the PCA version. I'm going to read.
Are we gonna blame, Short for getting us the wrong version?
Well, it does qualify that, there may be different versions of it, but, okay, this is what we have in the ARP.
Cool.
And because the powers which God hath ordained, and the liberty which Christ hath purchased, and are not attended by God to destroy, but mutually to uphold and preserve one another, they who upon pretense of Christian liberty shall oppose any lawful power, or the lawful exercise of it, whether it be civil or ecclesiastical, resist the ordinance of God. And for the publishing of, is that the one?
So, no.
No, I picked up the wrong thing, that's what I was, here we go, okay.
Alright.
Let that look great. All right. Let me see what,
Do you have an extra one of those for?
oh. All right, so, restarting, I have to edit that out.
ARP version at the bottom,
Alright.
I think.
Which version are you looking
Is
at?
it ARP?
Isn't the ARP in the second section
Oh, we got number 3.
there? Okay, so you know what, that's right, I
Civil Magistrate 3.
Civil Magistrate 3, I got the ARP version, and what's it, and it's number 4, right? Does it say IV there?
No.
There's
No,
3.
no, it's just 3.
It should be 4 though, well, 3 now. They're all
Yeah,
three.
wait a second, see?
We read 4 last.
Yeah, we read 4 on the,
4 is not here,
4 on the front.
and because the powers which God hath ordained.
Fine, that guy's.
But,
Yeah, the one that starts, and because the powers which God hath ordained.
That's the one we just
That
read.
is, yeah. 4.
Oh, I copied it to the wrong one. Okay, so I don't have it.
Here's the ARP 3. The civil magistrate may not assume to himself administration of the word and sacraments, or the power of the keys of the kingdom of heaven.
Right, I got that now. Okay, thank you,
Yeah.
everybody, and then the ARP is version on the bottom. Okay, so this is the ARP. The civil magistrate may not assume to himself administration of the word and sacraments, right? I'm on the right one? Or the power of the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Yet, as the gospel revelation lays indispensable obligations upon all classes of people who are favored with it, magistrates, that would be, again, that used to mean the king, but now it means the people who are over us in government, as such are bound to execute their respective offices in subserviency of his word, as those who shall give an account to the Lord Jesus, whom God hath appointed to be the judge of his world, as those who shall give an account to the Lord Jesus, whom God hath appointed to be the judge of the world. Hence, did I repeat that? Hence, magistrates as such in a Christian country, right? You don't remember saying that in what you read, are bound to promote the Christian religion as the most valuable interest of their subjects by all such means as are not inconsistent with civil rights and do not imply an interference with the policy of the church, which is the free and independent kingdom of the Redeemer, nor an assumption of dominion over conscience. So that's not the, you didn't read number 3, I think you read number 4, is that?
Yeah.
That's okay, so let's, number 3, it said something about them calling synods in there. That's, okay, so that was number 3, okay, so I'm sorry, we should have read, we were reading number 4, we should have read number
No,
3.
I read number
No, she
3.
read 3.
You did number 3.
I
Okay,
did read 3, yeah.
But she read 4 also first.
I'm trying to figure out.
Yes, you had me read 4 first from a different chapter.
Right, let's see, 3.
You had me read 4 from chapter 20, and then I just read 3 from chapter 23.
Yeah.
So
Am I
different.
freaking out?
It's a lot.
This is weird that this has this. Okay, so what's flipping me out over here, okay, is this last phrase. For the better effecting whereof he, the civil magistrate, hath power to call synods, to be present at them, and to provide that whatsoever is transaction in them be according to the mind of God.
Yeah, and you have that in the original one.
That is the original.
Yeah.
And I can't believe it's in this book.
Well,
This is not what we do.
Is that not the original one?
No, this is supposed to be the PCA version.
Does it say PCA anywhere on it?
No, it doesn't, but from the other ones that we followed.
But
Yeah, I mean, actually, we'll know for sure when we get, sorry about that.
Or wait, is that supposed to be the ARP one?
No, it definitely isn't the ARP, I knew that, let's
Oh,
see.
okay.
All right, I'm gonna have to talk. Okay, so let's just, I don't know why it says this, I'll have to look it over. I wish I'd gotten a copy of that book, I just
Well,
think I
do you
need it.
have it after today?
No, it's all
Take
right,
it?
we got one more class, let's,
Okay.
so I don't have to read what it says in the 1647 version. So this is what was the status of the relationship between the church and the government when this document was originally written in 1647. The king would decide when the annual meeting was going to take place. We now have synods where we have all of the elders and the and pastors and everything come and they discuss things, and again, that's right from Acts, where you would have the assembly. It doesn't have to be every year, but we do it every year. But the original Westminster Confession of Faith said that the government, the king and his people, and that we even carried on when there was parliament. Remember, 1647, we already had a parliament. They're the ones that wanted to have they had a parliament. They were the ones that declared there had to be this conference of the divines of the church to come up with the Westminster Confession of Faith. So there was already this more liberation of civil government from the king. But of course, when we came to America, that was changed. I'm going to just read the PCA version. If you look, see how short the PCA version is? And the OPC, they always make things longer and more complicated. But let's just read how the PCA knocked this down further and further and further to secure a separation of church and state. It is the duty of civil magistrates to protect the person and good name of all their people in such an effectual manner as that no person be allowed, either upon pretense of religion or of infidelity, to offer any indignity, violence, abuse, or injury to any person whatsoever, and to take order that all religious and ecclesiastical assemblies be held without molestation or disturbance. So what did they do? They took this concept that there's a civil magistrate that is definitely over us. We should pray for them, and they're God ordained and all of that. But what is their role in the church? if a riot breaks out of the synod, we can call the police and they can come in and help us. But they have absolutely no jurisdiction or anything over the church. It's completely left out. In the ARP version that I read, they take what was written in the 1647, where the government can have authority over the church, but now they apply it and they add this word that's only in the Westminster Confession of Faith version of the ARP, Christian country.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's the question. Do we live in a Christian country?
No.
Okay, so it's interesting. I just love the fact that the ARP left this in here. After synod after synod after synod, I'm sure it was discussed over and over, they decided to leave it in there because they said, hey, maybe someday we'll buy an island and move all the ARP people into this island, and we're going to have it declared a Christian country. Would be a place I would never want to be in. Because, that's just the ramifications of this. I have a battle going on Facebook. I get spend way too much on Facebook about what control, and it's fun because I have way right-wing people, way left-wing people. I got way right-wing Christians, way left-wing Christians, and seeing them, I just put it up there and I let them battle each other. But
I see what you do on Facebook, Sal.
Did you see the one
I
that
see it
there's
all
like
the time. I'm
60
just like, okay.
comments? Yeah, Jim Fakowski, you probably, he's become famous in Christian French. But anyway, so we left open the possibility that there could be a Christian country, and that in that Christian country, it would be back like it was in the days of 1647, and the government would be obligated to the church, and the church would be obligated to the government, and the theonomy of the Christian religion, which means that would be the law. So now it's interesting, if you go back in history, in the original documents of the Massachusetts colonies, they actually had quotes from the Bible. For disobedient children could be put to death. It's anybody caught in adultery and stuff like that. And it was actually right in there. Of course there would be trials, and most people didn't die, but the witches did get burned. So it's kind of a scary thing to even declare that you're in a Christian country. Keep track of the time for me, guys. Let me know when it's done.
9:30.
Okay, good. All right, so this is what we did. I didn't. No wonder I had the wrong copy of the notes. This is what we did in the ARP standards for Chapter 20, the one that we read first, where it talks about the civil magistrate at the end of that, and this chapter. Relating to Chapter 20, Paragraph 4, in a democratic society where the church and the state, with regard to their functions and their authority, are entirely separate, this must be interpreted to conform to the principles of separation. Certainly, the church believes in the right of the civil magistrate to punish evildoers, but it does not accept the principle of ecclesiastical subordination. The church is not the church is not subordinate to the civil authority, nor does it accept the principles of ecclesiastical authority over the state. So instead of changing the Westminster Confession of Faith, we're the only denomination that has these notes. And what's interesting is, as you're reading the sections, you would think it would say, see note.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't say that. If you don't know the notes are there, you would never know that you have to go all the way down to the end and see these notes that they added. Now, what's interesting is they also took out some notes that we'll talk about at some point if we have a chance. But there were notes that, I guess they found it easier to add notes or take away notes than it was to do that. So now the ultimate question is, what authority should the civil magistrate have over the church? Do you think there's any authority? If you can see, the PCA took away all authority. We left in a Christian country. Some people believe we're in a Christian country. And I guess it's a question that, like I said, I was debating with people online. Should the government have told my cousin that she could not transition her son to a daughter? Should the government have done that? Is that a religious thing, or is that a civil thing? And where do you draw the line on the separation of church and state? Should a woman be allowed to abort her baby, or should there be laws against it? This is what we're going on right now in the country. Are we as the church to influence and pray for our country and for the civil authority that they would do things that are right? Who determines what's right? That's the debate I was having. And yeah, I understand that you have this position. You think it should be illegal for a parent, she should be locked up if she's caught, he or she is caught helping their child to transition, dressing their little boy as a girl because the boy feels like it's a girl. Should that be the state's decision to make, or should it be the church? What would happen in a church situation, in a loving church, where you have a family that's caught with this dilemma? Now, I certainly would say I would draw the line. If somebody comes to our elders and says, look, my wife got pregnant, we already have 4 kids, we want to get an abortion, we just want to let you know, is that okay? Of course, I would think they would counsel them and they would give them all the other options and do it. But now we get to this other thing that's happening. Okay, you see, you all know little Billy since he was a baby. Everybody knows he looks more like a girl than a boy, and that's why he grows his hair long, and now he wants to wear dresses. What do you do? The point is, do we leave it to the church to decide, and the precepts of the church, of the denomination, and prayerfully go into it, or should it be the government? And where is that line drawn? So what the PCA has done, and the OPC, even in their much longer version, basically says there's nothing to talk about here. We took everything out of the original Westminster Confession of Faith that had any implication that there was authority of the church over the government or government over the church. The ARP version does still leave open that possibility that we can go to government, and that's why a lot of the ARP researchers, I don't know if I ever told you this, but when I walked in after Hillary Clinton lost, and I don't remember exactly what she said, but she said, glad, Hillary lost. I said, I voted for her. Of course, I'm not. You can't be a Christian and be a Democrat. Really? I said, nobody ever told me that.
This year.
Just this year, right?
Yeah.
So,
Fully committed.
yeah. So it's again, and there's loving ways to deal with it, and I try to. It's very easy to lose your temper, but the idea is that what do we as a church really think the government should be involved in? Now, this goes all the way back. When I did this first study, I went back to the Scopes trial. Okay, now I was very big into
Scopes trial.
Yeah, I'll tell you what it is in a second if you're not sure. Google it. But anyway, the Scopes trial was when evolution in 1859, after Origin of the Species came out, we became a more enlightened society. So if you're going to teach science in school, this was a scientific discovery, a scientific theory that needed to be taught. And I love when people say, well, I don't like it when they teach it as a fact. They should just teach it as a theory. Fact is like down here. Theory is like, the theory of gravity. I mean, that's a theory. There's no questioning of it. So that's when a theory, when you get all the facts and you could develop it into a theory, that's when it really is something that should be taught based on the scientific method. And this is all done by observation and what have you. We'll talk more about that next week. So there was this Scopes trial, was this guy Scopes, who was a teacher, not even a science teacher, but he agreed to do it. They passed a law in Tennessee that section of the science books, which had it for many, many years, this is in the 30s, or 20s, I don't remember, but it had this little section, just a little blurb about Darwin and his theory. And he reads it, and there's police there waiting to arrest him. And the Scopes trial. The movie about it is called Inherit the Wind. It's on my list. It's on my favorite list. You absolutely have to watch this movie. Very slanted towards anti-Christian, but it talks about, should the scientific things be taught, or should we only be allowed to teach creation in school? That's what they passed the law in Tennessee. That only in the state of Tennessee, the only story about how we got here could be the story right from the Bible. That's in creation and in Genesis, and anybody teaching anything differently could be arrested. So it's a great trial. Now what's interesting is, did I bring the book? Oh, don't tell me I didn't bring the book. Yes, I did. Please be in there. I know I bought it. Thank you. The book didn't drop there, did it?
No.
That's what happens when I stay up too late.
What time did you leave last night?
Well, I hung out with Jacob for a while and had a little more Cavassier, and that's probably a problem.
Love it.
Come on, it's right under here, right? No way.
Wait,
Is it under
under
right
that
there?
one? Under that paper.
Next
Next
paper.
paper.
There it is. Here we go.
We found
Okay, this book, this was written right after the Scopes trial. So not only was this group that advocated for only the creation method being taught, it's not theory, the creation truth being taught in school, I would say from my perspective. They also wanted to put prayer in school. Do you think we should have prayer in school? Like, people are posting all the time. The big meme going out right now is, they allow you to read the Bible in prison, but not in schools. If they allowed you to read them in schools, they probably wouldn't be in prison. I mean, so should the Bible be read in schools? Should there be prayer in school? What do you guys think?
I think you should have the freedom to do so.
Have the freedom to pray, right? And everybody, if there's as long as there's a pop quiz happening, there's going to be kids that are going to be praying all the time. Should the teacher lead the school in prayer?
No.
Why not?
Because
Well, I think we talked about this because what kind of prayer are they leading it in, and they could be some kind of witchcrafty prayer, could be some
Could be anything, right? Or who's going to
What
decide?
type of school is it? I
And
mean,
Well,
the
that's a
school
good-
is a place for education. In America, public school is a place for education, not religion.
Don't lean on the cup. Yeah, but should we take God out of the classroom? Should we take the Bible out of class? You're
Also,
advocating?
like, are we expecting every teacher to be a believer? Like, I think, and then for like, is that, it just, yeah, it comes down to, and then I'm looking through this of the lens of like my American idea,
Yeah.
right? Like, of Christianity as like individualism and, is that fair? But yeah, like, I have a lot of Jewish friends, and like, would they be taking all their kids out of public school if the prayer that has been decided is the type of praying we're gonna do in
Yeah.
school is Christian prayer? Are we talking about Jesus all the time? And then it separates, it puts us more into like
It
these
divides.
classes, and it divides us, so creating like the public school, the beauty of it, I think, is that it is the melting pot of a bunch of different cultures.
And religions.
And now and religions and everything, and so for that reason, I know I don't think that prayer should be a part of it. Cause like, while I would not mind if they're like, I've sent my kids to a Jewish school, I don't mind Jewish prayers. I think they're beautiful. I think they're wonderful, and I think that they are the basis for so much of what we believe as Christians.
Old Testament's this much, and the New
Right,
Testament's this
like, I
much.
think it's great, and I actually think they're beautiful prayers. But like, if that was the only thing, and then like, I just feel like there's a lot of questions, and like, how are we all answering those things at home? It's like, math homework's enough for me. to
Yeah,
try to explain to a
exactly.
kindergarten,
Yeah, I didn't want to, I also wanted to pick up on what you said. Should we have the right to pray in school? The Pledge of Allegiance is still said in many schools, especially here in the South. That under God, that was added way after when the Cold War started, because godless Russia, we're going to put under God.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's if you listen to old renditions of the Pledge of Allegiance, it doesn't have that phrase in there. Should somebody who's in an atheistic family say under God, should they be upset about the fact that it says in God we trust? On how much of is still remnant of that, what we've carried over from England, and there's a lot more than you would think. But again, you said, what kind of school is it?
Yeah.
Well, of course, in a Christian school, you could talk about evolution, but you would say this is what science has come to a conclusion about. We'll talk about it next week. By looking and observing, but differently because you believe in God, and you may believe it implicitly right now because you just believe in what your parents believe. But if you embrace that belief, you're going to know that God actually is this so powerful he can create the heavens and earth, and you could look at it from a different perspective. That would be taught in a Christian school. If that was taught in a public school, so now we're talking about public school. So what we have going on right now is this crazy, intense influence to make this a Christian country. I mean, you see it going on. The fundamentalist Christians, the Project 2025, or is that what it's called? Yeah, Project 2025. It's funny, as Trump is totally against it. He just kisses up to them, but to get their votes. But he would never, do those things. He doesn't want it to be a Christian country, if I could give him credit for anything. But anyway, the point is that, we're still going to have this, I don't know, call it interference, this influence from one to the other and the other. So our role as a church, if we're going to not want our children to be indoctrinated, right now there's a lot of stuff going on in the Supreme Court. Should this book that talks about Tommy with two moms be read to 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds? Well, if there's Tommy's in that class, I think he's going to love the fact that he's going to change his life. Wow, everybody's bullying me and picking on me, but look, there's somebody who wrote a book and they actually read it in class. Are we going to understand and accept the fact that there are differences in a Christian, a secular country that we need to, I don't want to say embrace, we need to accept just because it's healthier for kids. So again, these are the challenges that we have. But I wanted to read, this is J. Gresham Machen. When all of this was going on, he was a scholar at Princeton, and at that time Princeton was a Christian college. And there was the greatest minds and greatest Christian minds there. So they called them in. They said, hey, we got this debate going on. Should we make it against the law to block Darwinism from being here? What do you think? You're this great scholar, you've written all these books. What do you think about prayer in school and teaching creation in school and the Bible we read in school? And this is what he said. I probably didn't need the book because I probably could have said it by heart because I read it so many times. Bible reading in public schools. What are the solution then? In other words, if we are going to say they can't teach evolution in a public school, what's the solution? What other solution then has the public school to offer for the problem which we are considering just now? Well, many people tell us that reading of the Bible can be put into the public schools. Every educated man, we are told, ought to know something about the Bible, and no intelligent, broad-minded person, whether a Christian or not, ought to object to the bare reading of this great religious classic. So in many places we find the Bible being read in public schools. What shall we say about that? For my part, I have no hesitation in saying that I am strongly opposed to it. I think I am just about as strongly opposed to the reading of the Bible in state-controlled schools as any atheist could be. Have you ever heard this before? Pretty amazing, right?
Yeah.
This is on the Senate floor. For one thing, the reading of the Bible is very difficult to separate from propaganda about the Bible. I remember, for example, a book of selections from the Bible for school reading, public school reading, which was placed in my hands some time ago. Whether it is used now, I do not know, but it's typical of what will inevitably occur if the Bible is read in public schools. Under the guise of being a book of selections for Bible reading, it really presupposes the current naturalistic view of the Old Testament scriptures. It's the naturalistic view of the Old Testament scriptures. You have no idea what that's talking about. But what was going on at that time is people say, well, the Red Sea didn't really part. We can go back in history and it was just exaggerated, and there's a time when the water level is low. So people were trying to explain the things that happened in the Old Testament in a naturalistic view so people could accept that they might have happened, and that's how we get in Bible. But even where such errors are avoided, even where the Bible itself is read, and not in one of the current mistranslation, but the authorized version of the Bible, this King James, still may be so read as to obscure and even contradict its true message. When, for example, the great and glorious promises of the Bible to the redeemed children of God are read as though they belonged of right to man as man, we have not only attacked upon the very heart and core of the Bible teaching, we have attacked on the very core of the Bible teaching. What could be more terrible, for example, from the Christian point of view, than the reading of the Lord's Prayer? Remember, that's in the Bible, so it would be read there, to non-Christians' children, as though they could use it without becoming Christians, as though persons who have never been purchased by the blood of Christ could possibly say to God, "Our Father which art in heaven." The truth is that a garbled Bible may be a falsified Bible, and when any hope is held out to lost humanity from the so-called ethical portions of the Bible, apart from its great redemptive core, then the Bible is represented as saying the direct opposite of what it really says. So it was him and people like that speaking before Congress that ended up, even though Scopes lost the trial, he actually was found guilty, and he fined, I think, $100. It's a great movie, good part of the movie, but they take it all the way up to Supreme Court. And what ended up happening is creation couldn't be taught in school anymore. So
a couple questions,
Yeah, good.
thoughts to consider in this conversation. So, should there be separation of church and state is sort of like the broad thing here, and under state is education. You could say under church is also education, but I'm taking the conversation up a level and saying, like, what's the purpose of state government, right? What's its purpose, right? And that's could be, there's a lot of facets of it. Let's talk about the part that is to uphold law and order. Well, what defines law and order? Well, who defines it?
exactly.
And what is it based on? And if the state is basing law and order on whatever the heck, communism, or like, whatever the heck it feels like, I want my government to base law and order on what I believe is true law and order, which is based on the Bible and from my perspective. And therefore, I'm for base law and order. Don't kill people, right? That's bad. Don't,
Steal.
Commit adultery. There are only men and women, right? And so therefore, in some place, your government is basing its laws, morality somewhere, and I want that one to be rooted in what I believe is the best good, and that's found in the Bible.
Right. Well, hopefully the ARP will find an island someplace we can go and do it, and we would actually have that in our standards that it could occur. When I get in these debates with people, because it just happened recently, like I said on Facebook, he asked me, would I ever allow my son to cut off his penis and get that dramatic? If and I said no. I said I would say, look, you're my son. You can't make that decision till you're 21. As long as you're living in my house, I would do it just like I told him he couldn't get a tattoo. He said, so then if you're a pedophile, then you should be allowed to have sex with your son too, because you're making a decision. I said, no, it's against the law. So that's the point I'm trying to make. Who's going to make the laws? Are you going to make the laws, Jim? Am I going to make the laws? Is the Pope going to make the laws? Who makes the laws? So this is we could be on a very slippery slope right now. Who's really making the laws, and who's going to make these decisions? We don't realize how tentative our government is from for the how many years? 250 years are coming up on, I think. But yeah, I mean, it's scary. It really is, because I would love to see more of an influence. But I tell you, it's very simple and it's a cliche. But what would Jesus do? Show me in the Bible, in the New Testament, where Jesus says you should protest against this. There were people who were late to church, to the Lord's Supper in Corinthians, because they got delayed having sex at the temple where they would go. Their wife, they were a widow, and they would just have their regular meeting to have, and it was part of their religious worship in Rome. It was part of the thing that was just allowed and accepted. And the apostles had to say, no, we don't do that anymore. So there's no implication in the Bible whatsoever that Jesus says that we should become powerful and take over. It's quite the opposite. We should be an influence. We should be praying. So I think what's more godlike and what's more Christian-like is for us to be an influence, and for us to try to change hearts, and not necessarily and let those hearts change minds, because that's really all that matters. To force people to do what we think is right, it has nothing to do with their salvation.
But at some part, what is right, and if you're living in a country that is saying, well, yeah, I think I'm a girl, so I want to be a girl. Now I think I'm a child, so I want to be a child. And since I'm a child, I can have sex with children. That slippery slope.
There could
you
be
don't
some.
want you don't want that taught in your school. You don't want that in your
Yeah.
country. You don't want that, and so
Yeah, so again, what we have to realize is the government can make those decisions at any time. The only reason they don't is not because they're godlike. They're sinners just like us, and if they have nothing that's going to help them to want to fight that sin, those kinds of laws can be passed. I mean, again, if we go back generations, nobody ever thought that abortion would ever be legal, that gay marriage would ever be legal. Even in my lifetime, I'm older than you guys, but certainly, I would say in your lifetime, from the time you were kids. So, it can go that route. And it could also go the other route where we're going to enforce Christianity because we're going to have a real Christian leader. Jimmy Carter was probably the only Christian president I knew in my lifetime, but he was liberal. So what do we call to do as Christians? I would say that whatever the government is, there is a separation. It's clear in the Bible, just by example, that the theonomy of the Old Testament was done away with when Christ came. He was not going to become king and rule as they expected, and we basically explained to them, no, you misunderstood all of that. That was said there about me. We're going to live as the light, and we're passing through, just pilgrims passing through, and whatever government we are, providentially dropped into. And remember, there's countries all over the world that have Christians and that are dealing with things a lot differently than we are. They're persecuted constantly, and they could be killed just for their Christianity. It still happens. I think they've said in the 20th century there's more Christians killed than all of the previous centuries. But anyway, this is why it's in the Westminster Confession of Faith. I can't believe that it still has that the government should have the Senate. It's the 1647 version, but I'm going to go check that out with Soren. Apparently he didn't read it that carefully, but it's okay. But anyway, we got to go. So
Thank you, Sal.
you're welcome.
Thank you.
Let me stop this and then we'll. Yeah, it's interesting discussion, and we'll continue more.